So, um, I want you to imagine, just for a second, the profound sting of being slandered by someone you've, invested deeply in.
Oh, yeah, that is a very specific kind of pain.
Right. You know the exact feeling. It's that close friend who knows your character inside and out. Someone who has shared your space, eaten your food, and then they turn around and spread vicious rumors about you anyway.
Yeah, the betrayal there is just so complex because it's not coming from a known adversary.
Exactly.
Like when an enemy insults you, you kind of expect it, right? But when someone who has actually experienced your generosity actively paints you as a villain to the rest of the world, I mean, that just cuts straight to the core of human psychology.
It really does. And that deeply human, highly relatable experience of betrayal
Yeah.
is basically our starting point for this deep dive today.
Yeah, we're looking at a really fascinating historical and theological text.
Right. Specifically, we're focusing on an ancient prophetic verse, which is Hosea 7:13. And our mission today is to explore how this source material frames ancient geopolitical and agricultural history through, well, this exact lens of profound interpersonal betrayal.
It's a really unique angle.
It is. The text makes this compelling psychological claim that the ancient Israelites effectively, quote, lied about God. So we're going to unpack how those ancient lies operate, and more importantly, how the text maps those ancient political panics directly onto the psychology of our modern everyday anxieties.
Yeah, and to really grasp what the source is arguing here, we have to look at how it approaches history.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't treat the past as just, a dry sequence of dates and kings and battles.
Right, no one wants to read just a dry list of dates.
Exactly. It treats the relationship between God and the ancient northern kingdom of Israel as a deeply personal partnership that has been fractured. So the text portrays this profound divine heartbreak.
Which makes this way more than just a theology or history lesson.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, it reads like a psychological breakdown of how humans behave when the pressure is on and they start to panic. It's kind of like having a roommate who smiles to your face, happily eats all the groceries you just bought, and then goes to a party and tells everyone you're a deadbeat who never contributes.
That captures the dynamic the text is outlining perfectly. The verse at the center of our sources today, Hosea 7:3, it basically captures God speaking from that exact place of betrayal.
What does the text actually say there?
It reads, I longed to redeem them, but they have spoken lies about me.
Wow.
Yeah, the claim is that there was this deep desire to rescue the Israelites from some very real existential threats, right? To solve their most desperate problems. But instead of leaning into that relationship, they slandered him.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on this a little, or at least understand the mechanics of this slander. Because based on our source material, the Israelites were not explicitly speaking against God.
Right, no.
We don't have records of them writing anti-God manifestos or, standing in the town square declaring outright atheism. So if they aren't actually using their words to denounce him, how does the text justify calling it a lie?
That's the perfect question. And the source makes a fascinating point here about human communication. It argues that their slander was communicated entirely through their daily actions.
Their actions.
Yeah, their political alliances, their economic systems. They didn't have to utter a single syllable against God to broadcast a massive falsehood about who he was to the surrounding nations.
Okay, I see. So it's a silent lie.
Exactly.
Think about a friend who never actually insults you to your face, but actively avoids being seen with you in public. Like you walk into a crowded coffee shop, they see you, and they immediately look down at their phone and pretend they don't know you.
Oh, that's brutal. But yes, exactly.
Right. They don't have to say a single word.
Yeah.
The action of ignoring you communicates to the entire room that they're ashamed of you or that your relationship just holds no value.
Yep. That behavior broadcasts a narrative that contradicts reality. And the source material breaks down the Israelites' broadcasting into two major actionable lies.
Let's get into the first one.
So the first was a massive geopolitical PR crisis.
And we really need to set the historical stage for this because, well, the ancient Near East during the 8th century BC was incredibly volatile. The northern kingdom of Israel wasn't just dealing with, minor border disputes.
Not at all. They were living in the absolute shadow of the Assyrian Empire. And Assyria was this brutal, aggressively expanding war machine. The existential threat to Israel was absolute.
Right. I mean, entire nations were being swallowed up.
Cities leveled, populations completely displaced. And the text notes that in the face of this terror, instead of trusting in God for protection and maintaining their security in that relationship, the leaders of Israel they panicked.
So they look at the horizon, see this massive, terrifying army, and essentially decide that their historical god is outmatched.
Yes. The text actually describes them as fluttering, like a senseless dove.
A senseless dove. Wow.
Yeah, fluttering between making human treaties with these powerful pagan nations. So one day they're paying tribute to Assyria, and then the next day they're trying to form a backdoor alliance with Egypt to protect them from Assyria.
But wait, isn't securing your borders and making strategic political alliances just like basic smart diplomacy?
You would think so, sure.
Right. From a modern practical standpoint, why does the text view a basic survival strategy as a slanderous act?
Well, the text isn't really criticizing the concept of diplomacy itself. What it's doing is diagnosing the underlying panic.
Okay.
The theological argument here is that Israel's frantic behavior announced to the watching world that their God was either entirely unwilling or fundamentally too weak to defend his own people.
Oh, I see.
Right? By constantly fluttering between human empires in this desperate bid for military security, they were living as though the omnipotent God simply did not exist.
That makes a lot of sense. So when the heat gets turned up, their immediate reaction is, well, the divine protector can't handle this, so we need to go find a human army with bigger chariots to fix it.
Exactly. They were seeking secular salvation while claiming to worship a divine deliverer. The source argues that this complete failure of trust was a lived-out lie about God's capability.
Think about how often we do a version of this today, though. You get hit with a sudden, terrifying crisis. Maybe it's a medical diagnosis or, a massive, unexpected financial blow.
Right.
For a lot of people, the immediate reaction isn't to sit in stillness or lean into their faith. The immediate reaction is to frantically pull out a credit card, call a favor, work 90 hours a week, and just try to engineer a human solution out of sheer panic.
That frantic engineering is exactly the modern equivalent. And, since those political alliances ultimately failed to give ancient Israel any real sense of security, they predictably tried to manufacture control closer to home.
Which brings us to the second lie.
Right. The second devastating lie the text highlights.
Moving from the battlefield to the harvest. Because if the first lie was about physical border security, this second lie is all about everyday survival and agricultural prosperity. It's basically about stolen credit.
It really is. So the Israelites began adopting the superstitions of their Canaanite neighbors. They started bowing down to localized deities and carved idols.
Pieces of wood.
Literally pieces of wood and stone. And they falsely assumed that these statues were the actual source of their agricultural fertility, their favorable weather, and their economic success.
The audacity of this is staggering.
Oh, completely.
I mean, it's like doing all the heavy lifting on a massive, highly successful group project at work, staying up until 3 in the morning for weeks.
Yeah.
And then you watch your partner walk up to the podium and hand the Employee of the Month award to a desk lamp. It's absurd.
A desk lamp, that is perfectly analogous, yeah.
But help me wrap my head around the psychology of an agrarian society doing this. Their entire survival depends on the weather. Why would they so easily credit a carved piece of wood over a historical God who actually had a track record of delivering them?
The key psychological driver here is the illusion of control.
The illusion of control.
Yeah, because a historical relational God requires trust and obedience and patience, right? But a piece of wood, that's tangible. You can see it, you can touch it, you can place it in your living room.
Right, it's right there.
And most importantly, the Canaanite localized deities were entirely transactional. The cultural belief was that if you performed the specific ritual or, offered the right sacrifice to the idol contractually owed you rain.
So it's a mechanism for feeling in charge of the uncontrollable.
Yes.
Like a Wall Street trader who wears the exact same pair of lucky socks every time the market gets volatile. I mean, the socks aren't controlling the global economy, but putting them on gives the trader this tangible physical ritual that creates a false sense of security.
That's a great way to look at it. By taking the abundant blessings God provided, the rain, the harvest, the prosperity, and laying them at the feet of these transactional statues, the Israelites were accusing God of being indifferent or uninvolved. They lived out a massive lie about where their prosperity actually originated, basically stripping the credit from a relationship and handing it to a ritual.
Okay, so we have a really clear picture of the behavior now. We've got the lies of diplomacy, which is panicking and running to Egypt, and the lies of agriculture, which is giving the desk lamp the credit for the rain.
Yeah.
But how does a nation with such a profound history of deliverance reach this point? The source text must offer some kind of diagnosis for why they turn their backs so completely.
It definitely does. The text diagnoses the root cause as a severe case of collective spiritual amnesia.
Okay, collective spiritual amnesia.
Okay, collective spiritual amnesia. I'll be honest, I have a hard time buying that.
Really?
How so?
Well, how do you just forget a history of massive civilization-altering deliverance? You don't just misplace the memory of the Red Sea parting.
Right, right.
Is this text suggesting they engaged in deliberate, willful ignorance, where they just covered their ears? Or is it something else?
The source text suggests something much more insidious than deliberate ignorance, actually. It describes the natural human drift that occurs when comfort and complacency set in.
Okay, drift.
Yeah, the root cause was a severe lack of ongoing trust, born from neglecting to actually meditate on God's word or spend time understanding his character. Basically, they practiced a cultural religion.
Meaning they kept the traditions but lost the actual connection.
Exactly. They probably still attended the festivals and, went through the motions, but their internal lives were completely disconnected. And when you neglect a relationship, the memory of who that person is fades.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You don't wake up one morning and consciously decide to forget them. You just slowly stop remembering. And when you do not know someone intimately, it becomes incredibly easy to believe and spread falsehoods about them when the pressure is on.
Wow, and this is where the source text pulls no punches, because it refuses to leave this phenomenon back in the 8th century BC. It brings the psychological profile directly to the modern listener.
Oh, it really does.
If the ancient Israelites panicked and built idols because of spiritual amnesia, the text forces us to ask, do we do the exact same thing today, just, dressed up in modern clothes?
The text argues that the parallels are basically one-to-one. It points directly to modern people who only know God superficially.
Right.
Think about how many people today rely entirely on secondhand accounts for their faith. They listen to speakers, they follow influencers, they read books about faith, but they never actually cultivate a personal, quiet relationship with the source material themselves.
It is entirely secondhand faith. You're essentially trusting someone else's memory of who God is.
Exactly. And because of that superficial foundation, when those modern individuals face massive financial stress or cultural pressure or personal trauma, they immediately panic. They rely entirely on secular solutions or their own sheer willpower. And the text claims this is the modern equivalent of running to Assyria. It's broadcasting a lie about his power. Furthermore, chasing modern idols like obsessing over materialism, social status, wealth accumulation, that tells a lie about his ability to satisfy our deepest needs.
But the insight from the source material that really just stops you in your tracks is how it frames anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
The text suggests that harboring deep, unyielding anxiety is actually a form of, quote, gossiping about God to our own souls.
Gossiping to our own souls. It is a stunning phrase because it captures the internal mechanism of anxiety perfectly.
Think about the physical and mental isolation of anxiety. When you sit alone in a room spiraling about your future, your brain just creates this echo chamber.
Yeah, it really does.
You are essentially telling yourself a story, a vicious rumor, that you are entirely alone, that the situation is completely out of control, and that there is no capable protector coming to help you. You're taking the idea of a caring, omnipotent God and slandering it to your own internal audience.
The text argues that this internal echo chamber is the ultimate modern manifestation of Hosea 7.13. When you harbor that desperate anxiety without bringing it to him, you are reinforcing a false narrative. You're actively telling your soul that he either does not care about your survival or that he is simply incompetent to handle your reality.
Wow. So if the text is diagnosing modern anxiety and superficiality as the symptoms of this spiritual amnesia, what does it propose as the cure? Because we cannot just leave people sitting in an echo chamber of internal gossip.
Right, no. The ultimate antidote proposed by the source is the rigorous pursuit of genuine intimacy to cast off misunderstanding. You cannot slander someone you know deeply and intimately.
That's very true.
So the text outlines a very clear 3-step framework to rebuild this. Number 1, read the word directly. Immerse yourself in the primary source to discover true character, rather than relying on the secondhand accounts of speakers and platforms.
Basically, cut out the middleman?
Exactly. Number 2, cultivate a habit of prayer that prioritizes listening in stillness just as much as speaking. And number 3, spend unhurried time just being present, loving God for who he is, rather than treating him like a Canaanite idol and only valuing what he can provide transactionally.
Okay, hold on. I have to interject here.
Sure, go ahead.
You are looking at a 21st century listener and telling them to practice listening in stillness and unhurried time. We live in a culture that literally financially and socially rewards constant noise, aggressive hustle, and relentless production.
Oh, absolutely. It's the water we swim in.
Our entire societal infrastructure is built to prevent unhurried time. So how does anyone actually do that without falling behind?
Well, the source material implicitly acknowledges that friction. Practicing stillness in today's culture has to be a deliberate act of rebellion.
A rebellion.
Yeah, it requires aggressive intentionality. It means physically turning off the phone. It means carving out 10 or 15 minutes in the morning where you are not producing a single thing for your job and you are not consuming a single piece of content.
Wow, that sounds impossible some days.
It does, but the text argues that until you are willing to prioritize that rebellious stillness, you will remain trapped in the exhausting cycle of panic and superficiality. You simply cannot build genuine intimacy in a rush.
So you are trading the frantic, exhausting fluttering for actual grounded peace.
Exactly.
Let's look back at the thread we just pulled through this deep dive. We started with the universal sting of a friend speaking lies behind your back. We explore the text claim that ancient Israel did exactly that to God, broadcasting lies about his power by panicking and running to foreign armies.
Right, the political lie.
And lying about his provision by handing the credit for their prosperity to carved statues.
And then we saw how the text diagnoses the root cause as spiritual amnesia, that complacency that just forgets history. And we map that directly onto our modern struggles, seeing how our anxiety is an internal echo chamber where we gossip to our own souls, and how our materialism is really just a new version of idol worship.
And the solution offered is to push past secondhand knowledge into deliberate, rebellious, quiet intimacy. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text makes a compelling case that harboring deep anxiety is a way of gossiping to our own souls, that God is incompetent when things go wrong. But what happens when things are going right?
Well, that's interesting. The psychology flips, but the underlying lie remains the exact same.
Exactly. If anxiety is our modern Egypt, the place we frantically run to when we panic, does our pride become our modern Canaanite idol?
Wow.
Right. When you experience a massive win at work, when you achieve significant economic success or build a respected social status today, do you quietly take the credit entirely for yourself? By patting yourself on the back, attributing all your success to your own hustle, and ignoring any providence that got you there, do you effectively become your very own false idol?
That's a really challenging question.
It is something for you to quietly consider the next time you find yourself feeling entirely self-reliant. Just remember that roommate who smiles to your face and takes the credit for the groceries. Let's make sure we aren't doing the same thing.